I will begin with my presentation titled The Social Consequences of Climate Change as a Challenge to Ecological Security and NATO's Stability. Mm, uh, okay. Today I would like focus on how climate change has growing a global threat leads to serious social consequences that ultimately challenge both ecological security and the strategic stability of NATO. The topic is more urgent than ever, as environmental disruptions reshape the world. They also reshape our security priorities. Let's begin by recognizing a fundamental fact. Climate change is no longer just an environmental issue, it's a security issue. Extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and resource scarcity are already destabilizing vulnerable regions. But behind these environmental indicators lie deep social disruption. Entire communities lose homes and livelihoods. Access to food and water becomes contested. Political tensions grow in fragile states, and most importantly, climate driven migration accelerates. Uh, Climate change acts as what NATO call a threat multiplier. It exacerbates existing social, political, and economic vulnerabilities. Poor population are hit hardest, lacking resilience. Developing countries face repeated setbacks from floods or droughts. This leads to competition over land and water, sparking internal or regional conflict, and ultimately this results in forced migration, social unrest, and even violent extremism. We've seen the dynamic in the Sahel, the Middle East, and parts of South Asia, and NATO cannot ignore it. NATO's point out that climate change depends existing social economics inequalities, both between countries and within them. Low-income nations and communities are disproportionately affected because they often lack the resources needed for adaptation. They have limited infrastructure, their public health and emergency response systems are underdeveloped, which amplifies the long-term damage of climate-related disasters. The economies, often reliant on agriculture, are highly vulnerable to climate disruptions. In contrast, wealthier nations and social classes have the means to shield themselves from many of the world's impacts through technological innovation, private insurance, system relocation options, strong governance, and early warning systems. Science, yes, okay. Science, its founding in 1949, and NATO was a classic military alliance, but over the decades it has evolved. After the Cold War, it adapted to new threats, terrorism, cyber warfare, hybrid tactics, but in 2010, for the first time, NATO officially recognized climate change in its strategic concept. From that moment on, the issues of climate gradually uh, begin to take more prominent place on the alliance agenda, highlighting the need to adapt its structures and strategies to the rapidly changing global conditions. However, For the context of my presentation, the most important are three reports, which were published in accordance with the Climate Change and Security Actions Plan. This report addressed issues related to the impact of climate change and social security and NATO's actions. In the next slides, I will present information contained in these three editions of the report. Okay. First, I would like to highlight the impact of climate change on public health and health systems. In Europe alone, over 61,000 deaths were attributed to heat waves in 2022, with women experiencing 56% more heat-related fatalities than men. The rising number of hospitalization and medical emergencies has placed enormous pressure on healthcare systems. Additionally, climate change increases the risk of infectious diseases, such as malaria driven by biodiversity loss and closer contact between humans and animals. This overload of health services not only affects civilian population but also weakens the capacity of national and NATO's military support systems. Overall, the consequences include a deterioration of both physical and mental health across affected communities. Okay. Drought and heat waves are significantly reducing crop yields and the availability of fresh water. In 2022, cereal production in Europe will be 9% with maize being particularly affected. Additionally, food storage, transportation, and fisheries and suffering due to ecological degradation. These factors increase the risk of regional famines and social unrest. Okay. Extreme weather events have increasingly disrupted transportation networks and electricity grids. For example, the floods in Slovenia in 2023, wildfires in Canada in 2023, and storms in Norway in 2024 caused significant damage. These disruptions impact not only civilian population but also military logistic, complicating operational capabilities and response efforts. There is an increasing reliance on military supports during civil emergencies. For example, in 2023, over 2,200 troops were deployed in Canada to combat wildfires. Similarly, NATO's and Kosovo forces have supported local authorities during floods and fires. However, frequent deployment of military forces for disaster relief may reduce their readiness for defense operations. An important and emerging factor is the increased vulnerability of marginalized groups due to climate change. Women, children, and other marginalized communities are disproportionately affected by its impacts. This highlights the critical need to integrate human security and gender perspectives in NATO's climate security policies to ensure inclusive and effective responses. Finally, but most visibly, climate migration. Extreme weather events cause both internal and cross-border displacement. This put significant pressure on essential services such as food, water, energy, healthcare, communication, and transportation. Additionally, it hampers the ability of national authorities and armed forces to respond effectively to multiple threats happening at the same time. This is not about adding climate to NATO's agenda. It's about redefining security itself. We now understand that climate insecurity affects food and water supply, migration flows, political legitimacy, energy systems, and digital infrastructure. Its stance in NATO is becoming more than a military alliance. It's becoming a platform for ecological and societal resilience. And final thoughts. Climate change is not only about rising temperatures, it is about shifting the foundation of global security. It produces social consequences that are harder to measure but deeply destabilizing. NATO must continue to evolve, integrating climate science, social impact analysis, and environmental policy into its core operation. The stability of the alliance will depend not only on tanks on traders, but on how well we prepare for the climate shocks that are already reshaping our world. I would like to emphasize that addressing this challenge requires a holistic approach that combines military readiness with social resilience and international cooperation. Only by understanding how environmental, social, and security issues are connected can NATO effectively safeguard peace and stability into the decades to come. And thank you for your attention.